Hello again, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this Tuesday's edition of Alaska Weather on the 3rd day of May 2022. Up first, we've got the Nenana Ice Classic tripod fell over Sunday morning, but the clock didn't stop running. The tripod didn't get far enough downriver to pull the line to stop the clock, but that occurred Monday evening at 6:47 p.m. Alaska Standard Time. So that's the winning time this year, 6:47 p.m. So if you've got that time, go collect your winnings. And moving on to the breakup map, you can see some open water all along the Tanana River, right on out till it meets the Yukon there at Tanana. Yukon River itself still mostly ice the entire stretch of the way there until you get down to the delta from about Bethel on down. There's some open water right out to the coastline. And Kuskokwim River, same thing in the lower stretch there. Actually, not Bethel, not on the Yukon, Bethel on the Kuskokwim. And it looks like from about Sleepmute on down, more or less there, the lower part of the Kuskokwim has some open areas on it, but the Susitna River, still mostly ice. Copper River, some areas open water. And the northern rivers, of course, frozen solid yet. And moving on to the hazardous weather graphics, there are no watches, warnings, or advisories out anywhere for the state for the next couple of days, maybe longer. Pretty good storm in the Gulf of Alaska today did bring some gusty winds and rain, good amounts of rain along the southeast coast to the North Gulf Coast overnight last night and into today. But the front has moved eastward well into Canada there, and now actually south of the Queen Charlotte Island, south of the Panhandle. Just a lot of shower conditions in the Gulf of Alaska, continuing to push up to the North Gulf Coast today and into the Panhandle with areas of clouds out over the interior with areas of sunshine. You can see in the central interior there, out to the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, mostly sunny skies there around Yukon Delta down toward Togiak Bay today. And also a fair amount of clearing over the eastern Bering Sea from the Pribilofs right on up into Norton Sound there in the southern Seward Peninsula. But cold upper low pressure coming down from the Chukchi Sea, bringing snow to the Bering Strait and in toward Kotzebue. Kotzebue picked up 1 to 2 inches of snow during the day today over toward Kiana. And Koyukuk out there on the northeast end of Norton Sound. Koyukuk had about 1 inch of snow there with that system, and light snow today, temperatures in the teens at Gamble, gusty north winds there. But ahead of the front over the Panhandle, winds gusted as high as 50 miles an hour at Cape Decision there on the south coast. Heidelberg had a peak wind gust 45 miles an hour, and Juneau 36 miles an hour, and Ketchikan 40 miles an hour to go with their 1 2/3 inches of rainfall. Petersburg picked up a little over 1 inch and 8/10 of an inch at Juneau, and Yakutat had about 2 inches, all of which has lightened up, becoming more showery during the afternoon hours today. And rolling that through again, you can see the counterclockwise rotation of the clouds there east of Kodiak Island where the low center is. But back to the west, drier conditions, but still pretty gusty on the northwest winds. Tuksuk Bay northwest gust 45 miles an hour, and Nikolsky there on Unimak Island 48 miles an hour, while False Pass, the Alaska Peninsula, had northwest winds gust to 51 miles per hour with higher pressure just to the west. Those will lighten up tonight. Already lightening up in response to that low trough dropping southward. The clear skies over the Pribilofs today, that'll give way to snow showers tonight as that trough drops inland there. You can see low center, weak low center about 1,001 millibars, but it is much stronger aloft and pulling cold air southward again, so look for snow. Periods of for the Pribilofs back to St. Lawrence Island. Snow showers the Seward Peninsula, Bering Strait, areas of light flurries, fog, low clouds, Arctic coast, North Slope at times anywhere tonight. And for the North Gulf Coast and the Panhandle stays unsettled and wet with numerous rain and snow showers along the North Gulf Coast into the Panhandle. Periods of light rain, fog, and drizzle. Kodiak Island, mostly cloudy. Southern Alaska, with rain and snow showers. Chances of rain and snow showers up into the Yukon Flats down to the White Mountains there. Probably staying dry for the most part in the Tanana Valley. And the outlook for Wednesday, tomorrow, still a chance of snow, the weak trough over the eastern Arctic coast into the North Slope areas. And that low continues to weaken there, east-southeast of Kodiak Island, remaining more or less in place. They'll continue to send surges of showers and light rain with cloudy skies into the Panhandle as well as the North Gulf Coast. Stays cloudy with showery conditions for Kodiak Island, but amounts will be on the light side. And that low center drops to just west of the Pribilof Islands with periods of snow continuing for St. Paul and St. George. Rain and snow showers on the increase for the eastern and east central Aleutians to the Alaska Peninsula as that center starts to drop in toward the area there. Another weak trough keeps some flurries around St. Lawrence Island, otherwise dry over the western interior. Moving on to the outlook for Thursday. Pretty unsettled, mostly cloudy, scattered rain and snow showers across much of southern Alaska, scattered isolated over the central interior, a little more numerous Kodiak Island and the North Gulf Coast. Probably the heaviest precipitation amounts will be over the eastern North Gulf Coast from Yakutat down into the central Panhandle. That cold low drops into the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula during the midday hours, early morning to midday hours, and then gets south of the chain, south of Unalaska Island late in the afternoon. Snow showers end over the Pribilofs, but periods of snow from Matka Island eastward to the Alaska Peninsula looks good for the forecast there, but dry west coast northern Bering Sea with light winds and still a chance of snow flurries over the eastern Arctic coastal areas. And the lows for tonight in the teens there for the Arctic coast. North Slope into the Brooks Range, Anatuvik Pass, looking at a low of about 14. Otherwise, Arctic Village, 25. Same thing for Kobuk, about 25 in the Kobuk Valley. Otherwise, 30s, lower to mid-30s over the central interior to lower 20s, lower to mid-20s along the Yukon Delta coast, near 20 St. Lawrence Island, upper 20s for the Pribilofs. Lower to mid-30s for the Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. Mid to upper 30s for Bristol Bay. And mid-30s to near 40 for the lows, south central Alaska, lower 40s for Kodiak Island, and upper 30s to lower 40s for the Panhandle. As for highs, Wednesday afternoon, not too bad up in the Tanana Valley in the mid to maybe upper 50s, all the way up to the Yukon Flats around Fort Yukon. Chalk Yitzhak could reach 57, 58, 45 to 50 for Bristol Bay. And upper 40s to mid-50s, south central Alaska, warmest conditions in the Susitna Valley, and 50 around the Kenai Soldotna area, lower 50s in the Anchorage area, upper 40s, lower 50s for the southeast coast, and into the lower 50s for the Copper River Basin. Out west, highs just edging above freezing for the Pribilofs with snow in the forecast tomorrow, upper 30s to near 40 for the Aleutians, and in the 20s for the Arctic coast and North Slope. Lows Thursday morning, 10 to 15 for the Arctic coast and in the teens into the North Slope areas. 30s for the interior, some areas dropping in the upper 20s, especially out along the southwest coast, upper 20s there, including the Pribilofs, lower to mid-30s for the Aleutians. And in the 30s, south central Alaska, as well as the Kuskokwim Valley areas, upper 30s to lower 40s for the Panhandle. Followed by highs, 50 to 55, central interior, as well as south central Alaska, lower 50s for the Copper River Basin, upper 40s, lower 50s for the Panhandle, teens and 20s for the Arctic coast and North Slope.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Okay, taking a look at flying weather for tomorrow morning, Wednesday morning. IFR, Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast. Some of that down across the Selawik Valley into Kotzebue Sound and southeastward there to the mid-Yukon River and then down to the north shore of St. Lawrence Island. Another area of IFR out over the Bering Sea with that cold upper low. It's dropping southward into the south central Bering Sea from the Pribilofs, IFR down into Atka, and mostly just north of the Aleutians, marginal VFR to the west and east, and into the western Alaska Peninsula. IFR, Gulf of Alaska, Kodiak Island, all the North Gulf Coast, and southern Kenai Peninsula into southern Cook Inlet, Kamishak, Kachemak Bay, but marginal VFR up to about Kenai, and then northern Cook Inlet looking VFR, some areas of VFR over the Copper River Basin and eastern interior. And for the afternoon, for Wednesday afternoon, there we go, IFR along the Arctic coast, marginal for the North Slope, and then areas of marginal VFR in the interior, especially west central interior, VFR east side, and some VFR, Norton Sound, southern Seward Peninsula, right down across Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, Togiak Bay into the Alaska Peninsula, the band of IFR from the north shore of the Seward Peninsula through the Bering Strait to St. Lawrence Island, down across the Pribilofs to the eastern Aleutians. IFR holding over the Gulf of Alaska, but just reaching the coastline of Kodiak, Fognak Island, and right along the western North Gulf coast with marginal VFR, Prince William Sound, and southern Cook Inlet, and the southern Copper River Basin, maybe up to the Talkeetnas, VFR for the Panhandle. And moving on to the Thursday morning, IFR eastern Arctic coast, IFR central Bering Sea down to the Fox Islands, also for the North Gulf coast and the west central interior Arizona marginal VFR. They're from the Kobuk and Koyukuk valleys southward across the mid and lower Yukon River Valley, across Bristol Bay and southern Cook Inlet, Kodiak Island. And then for the outlook for Thursday afternoon, not too bad in the interior. A lot of VFR with some marginal VFR thrown in. Lingering IFR eastern Arctic coast. Also the northern Bering Sea, western Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, Pribilofs, all in the IFR zone. But good VFR building over the western Aleutians, pushing eastward, Adak and Atka, southwest Bering Sea. And IFR now off the coast in the Gulf of Alaska and over the northeast Pacific. So that leaves Kodiak Island in the marginal zone, as well as the North Gulf coast, into the Coast Range and the Talkeetna Mountains, maybe up to Nabesna. Otherwise, the Panhandle remaining mostly VFR with some lower conditions along the central coast. And Atuvik, pretty good. Occasional marginal VFR tomorrow. Same thing for Adigan, making it a little better than today. Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR. And rainy, same forecast, occasionally marginal at times. Windy, marginal VFR early on, trending toward VFR throughout the day and into the afternoon. Same trend for Isabel, marginal, lowest conditions to start. VFR, afternoon hours toward evening. Mintasta, VFR. Tanita, VFR. Portage, marginal VFR. And Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels at the surface up into the central interior, 2,000 feet over the central interior as well, 4,000 feet there along the central and southern panhandle, and a pocket of 2,000-foot freezing levels right over Kodiak Island. And for icing, look for isolated moderate rime icing there over the panhandle, with that becomes a little more on the mixed side for the North Gulf coast, between 5,000 to 12,000 feet, and another zone there of mostly mixed to maybe mostly rime light to isolated moderate icing there over the Bering Sea from the Pribilofs down to the central eastern Aleutians to maybe as far east as False Pass on the Alaska Peninsula. Jet stream, cold upper low dropping southward over the Bering Sea, another upper low in the Gulf, southern Gulf. So that keeps the jet well south of the forecast area. Pushing into the British Columbia, Western Canada, southwest 100 knots, clipping the southern panhandle at 80 knots, 9,000 feet, low pressure in the Western Gulf, east-southeast of Kodiak, 20-25 knot winds with that. Stronger low in the Bering Sea, easterlies 40 knots, turn northerly 50 knots, and then become northwest 35 knots for the central and eastern Aleutians, 3,000 feet, 25 knot winds for the Aleutians, and east-northeast 30 to 35 knots, St. Lawrence Island to Point Hope and Cape Lisburne. And moderate, light to isolated moderate chop, eastern North Gulf Coast Panhandle, central Aleutians.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and today I'm privileged to introduce Dr. Uccellini, the Director of the United States National Weather Service. Welcome back to Alaska, sir.
Thank you, Dave. Glad to be here.
Thanks. Prior to being the leader of the National Weather Service, your work included an extensive look at snowstorms across the northeastern United States. These are the types of storms that can bring some of the country's largest cities to its knees. Tell me a little bit about your fascination with snow.
Well, as far back as I can remember, I've always been interested in weather, growing up as a kid on Long Island, New York, and was particularly fascinated by snowstorms. Why they occurred, the distribution of snow was very varied across the entire region, the rain-snow line, all those things fascinated me right from the get-go. And I was interested in knowing how they worked, how the forecast worked, or more often than not, didn't work one way or the other. And that drove me, that interest continued to build and drove me through high school right into college, wanting to be a meteorologist.
Okay, that's a fascinating story, and I think every meteorologist has a weather story like that in some way.
Right.
Due to Alaska's size and proximity to the North Pole, sometimes it's difficult to detect and analyze the weather patterns over Alaska. What's the National Weather Service doing to improve that weather detection?
Well, observations in this type of environment is a big challenge, whether it's from space or from what we call in situ observations from the ground or within the systems. Clearly, satellites have been playing an increasing role in providing the big picture, not only from a visual sense in what you see is occurring, but also from providing the data for numerical models that then are used to actually predict the weather. Alaska is actually pretty well positioned with respect to polar orbiting satellites, since you get a faster return of those satellites over your particular area. And in fact, the polar satellite system is the backbone for the observations that we use in our models, especially our global models, and they're particularly important for observing weather features that affect Alaska.
Alaskans live and die by the weather every day, and one of the strategic goals of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the National Weather Service is to develop a more weather-ready nation. What does it mean for Alaskans to be weather-ready?
Well, the strategic outcome is based on people being ready, responsive, and therefore resilient to the increasing threats to extreme weather events. Those threats are related to not only the nature of the events, but the fact that we're becoming more vulnerable to them as we have more people, more infrastructure that could be affected by these events. So we have to ensure that the observations we make for situational awareness, the forecasts we make for people to take the proper responses, are connected to people's actions, the response to these events, so that they will be more resilient to what's facing them. You know, there are examples with respect to hurricanes. More people living along the coastline takes longer to evacuate. We have to make better forecasts with longer lead times, but we also have to communicate the threat so people will actually take action to avoid those storms. Up here you have, as in other parts of the United States, an increasing threat related to fire. As there are more people living in fire-prone areas, we have to ensure that our forecasts are good, that we don't have false alarms that make people not react to the forecast when in fact they should. But we also have to be able to communicate the threat and make sure that we're working with the partners in the emergency management community so that communities and right down to individuals will actually take the proper responses in the face of these events. So that's the strategic goal. There are a lot of challenges for us in terms of improving forecasts, but also improving our communication skills and linking with the emergency management communities that are actually out there trying to protect lives and mitigate property loss.
So a huge partnership effort going forward.
That's one of the important keys for the success of meeting the strategic goal.
Okay. One of the things you're talking about was understanding the weather information we're getting back from the computers, weather modeling, and you did a lot of work with that in some of your prior positions with the Environmental Prediction Center there, the National Center for Environmental Prediction. What can you tell us about recent improvements in that weather modeling? And you were using the polar orbiters as kind of a source of information that started that process.
Well, you know, first of all, we have to recognize that everything you see, you read and hear about weather, climate, or ocean forecasts are all driven by numerical models. Now, it really has been the revolution in our forecast process in the last part of the 20th century. The success of that numerical enterprise is based on three factors: big computers, global data, not just local data, but you have to have a global data set, and then the models themselves, the science that's behind the models and in running the models in an operational mode. So we're working to improve all three of those components. We upgraded our computers last year. We're going through another upgrade even as I speak. We'll be upgrading from 200 trillion calculations per second to 700 trillion calculations per second by January of 2015. This increase in the computer will allow us to run what we call Earth system models. It's not just the atmosphere, it's the atmosphere, ocean, ice, which is obviously very important up here, and land models that are all coupled together at higher resolution. So you need the big computers, you need the science that allows us to run these models and run them in a parallel mode, and that they're coupled so that the ocean effects could affect the atmosphere and vice versa, as an example. And then the global observations are absolutely critical, and over the last 20, 30 years they've become more dependent upon the satellite systems, and especially the polar orbiting satellites, which help drive the observations needed for those models, whether they be atmospheric observations, land, ice observations. We're deriving more and more of that from satellites now that feed into these models and produce forecasts with extended lead times. Now out, for extreme events especially, we're seeing much improved forecast out in the 4, 5, 6, 7, and even 8-day range, which gets us back to Weather Ready Nation, because if you're going to get ready for a storm event, you want those consistent forecasts approaching that event from day 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, so you can take the actions several days in advance that can help mitigate the property loss and protect your livelihood.
Okay, all part of the mission of protecting life and property. Dr. Uccellini, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and speaking to Alaskans and sharing how the National Weather Service is working for Alaska and the nation. Wish you safe travels around the 49th. Enjoy your time here, sir. And for Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis, they're really thinning out, continuing to thin out along the southwest coast, even into Norton Sound. Area of thinning ice continues to expand, and open water now to the northeast of St. Matthew Island and just off the Yukon Delta coast, but still on the heavy side there, north shore of St. Lawrence Island into the Bering Strait area. And for the coastal water forecasts, we've got south winds at 20 knots for the south coast, and small craft advisories on the north coast for south to southeast winds at 25 knots. Lighter winds, Lynn Canal Glacier Bay, southerlies at about 10 knots with 2-foot seas. Southeast breeze, 15 knots for Stevens Passage, and southeast at 20 for Clarence Strait with seas running as high as 8 feet. And the outlook for Thursday, southeast winds 20 knots for the north coast of the Panhandle. South coast, south winds 15 knots, seas 9 feet. And variable winds at 10 knots for the northern central inside waters, with slight seas, and Clarence Strait looking at a southeast breeze at 15 knots. Prince William Sound, northeast winds 15 knots, seas 3 feet for the day of Wednesday. And Cook Inlet, north to northeast winds 10 to 20 knots with 2 to 3 foot seas, otherwise light variable winds for Kamishak Bay at 10 knots. And for the Barren Islands and western North Gulf Coast, northeast winds 20 knots with seas at 8 feet, and small craft advisories for the eastern North Gulf Coast for east winds at 25 knots. And looking ahead to Thursday, Prince William Sound, light northeast breeze at 10 knots. Same thing for northern Cook Inlet. Otherwise, for the North Gulf Coast, east-northeast winds at 20 knots with 6 to 7 foot seas, and the Barren Islands looking at a northeast wind at 20 knots. Kamishak Bay, northeast at 15 with seas at 2 feet. And moving to Kodiak Island for Wednesday, north winds 15 knots, seas 9 feet. Alaska Peninsula, west to northwest winds 15 to 20 knots with 5 to 8 foot seas. And for Bristol Bay, winds will be west at 20 knots with seas running at about 5 feet. And for Thursday, Bristol Bay, light west breeze at 10 knots. And for the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula, northeast winds 15 knots, Pacific side southwest 15. And from Sitkinak to Castle Cape, those southwest winds turn westerly at 15 knots. Kodiak Island, north winds 15 knots. For the central and eastern Aleutians for Wednesday, all westerly at 20 knots with seas running 5 to 7 feet. And for the area from Amchitka Island to Shimia, northwest winds at 20 knots with 6 foot seas. And the outlook for Thursday, shimmy at Amchitka Island, northwest winds 15 to 20 knots with 5 to 7 foot seas. Central Aleutian, small craft advisories, northwest winds 25 knots with 10 foot seas. And for the Fox Islands, small craft advisories, west-northwest winds 25 to 30 knots with seas running 8 to 10 feet. For the southwest coast, 10 to 15 knot winds from the northeast to northwest. And for St. Matthew Island, small craft advisories, and same thing for St. Lawrence Island, both areas there, small craft advisories, north winds 25 knots, seas 4 to 5 feet. In the Pribilof Islands, northwest at 15 knots, and Norton Sound north at 10. And for Thursday, Yukon Delta Coast, light variable winds at 10 knots, Kuskokwim Delta Coast, northwest at 10, Pribilof Islands, north winds 20 knots with 6 foot seas, 15 knot northerlies for St. Matthew Island, and back to 20 knots out of the north for St. Lawrence Island with 3 foot seas. For the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, north to northwest winds at 15 knots. The central coast, due northerlies at 20 knots, and northeast at 20 for the western Arctic coast. And then brisk wind advisories from Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson, northeast winds at 30 knots, and then from Cape Thompson to Wales, north winds 20 knots. And on Thursday, brisk wind advisories continue for northeast winds at 25 knots from Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort. Otherwise, for the western central Arctic coast, northeast winds 20 knots. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, north to northeast winds 15 to 20 knots. For tonight, look for clouds, areas of light snow and flurries for the Arctic coast into the North Slope, and that makes it into the Brooks Range to a certain extent, but south of the mountains there, scattered rain and snow showers become a little more widespread along the North Gulf Coast, Kodiak Island, with that more or less stationary low there southeast of Kodiak. Low pressure dropping southward brings more snow showers to the Pribilofs tonight through tomorrow, and then that system drops southeastward and brings snow and snow showers to the central and eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula on Thursday with drier conditions behind. Stays mostly cloudy and unsettled with areas of rain and snow showers over the southern part of the state and the Panhandle. Chance of snow continues up over the Arctic coast. That's all I have time for. Thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.